Like and subscribe for more content.
The shift from the protections afforded to whistleblowers to the rights and responsibilities within the landlord-tenant relationship represents a transition from the workplace to the home, a fundamental aspect of individual well-being. While whistleblower laws focus on protecting individuals who expose wrongdoing within organizations, the laws governing landlord-tenant relations aim to balance the interests of property owners with the rights of those who rent their properties. This balance is often precarious, with frequent disputes arising from lease agreements, rent payments, property conditions, and the eviction process. Understanding the legal framework surrounding these interactions is crucial for both landlords and tenants to navigate the complexities of the rental market and protect their rights. The cornerstone of the landlord-tenant relationship is the lease agreement. This legally binding contract outlines the terms and conditions of the rental arrangement, including the rent amount, payment schedule, duration of the lease, and the responsibilities of each party. A well-drafted lease agreement, reviewed by both parties, and ideally with legal counsel if complex issues are present, minimizes potential conflicts by clearly defining expectations. However, even with a meticulously crafted lease, ambiguities can arise, necessitating an understanding of relevant state and local laws. These laws often dictate minimum standards for habitability, maintenance responsibilities, and procedures for rent increases or lease terminations. It's crucial for both landlords and tenants to be familiar with these laws, as they often provide additional protections beyond what's explicitly stated in the lease agreement. For instance, many jurisdictions have implemented implied warranty of habitability, which legally obligates landlords to maintain a habitable dwelling. This typically encompasses ensuring that the property is safe, sanitary, and free from significant structural defects that affect the tenant's health and safety. This doesn't mean landlords are obligated to perform every repair requested by a tenant, but rather to address issues that render the property uninhabitable or pose a serious threat to the tenant's well-being. A leaky roof causing water damage, a malfunctioning heating system in winter, or a significant infestation of pests are examples of conditions that generally fall under this implied warranty. Failure to address such issues can provide grounds for tenants to withhold rent, in some jurisdictions with specific legal procedures, seek repairs through court order, or even terminate the lease. The specific legal processes and remedies vary by jurisdiction, highlighting the importance of consulting with local legal resources for guidance. Conversely, tenants have responsibilities outlined in their lease agreements and state laws. These responsibilities typically include paying rent on time, maintaining the property in a reasonably clean condition, and refraining from damaging the property or engaging in illegal activities on the premises. Violations of these responsibilities can provide grounds for landlords to initiate eviction proceedings. The consequences of failing to uphold these responsibilities can range from late fees to eviction, depending on the severity and frequency of the violation. A consistent pattern of late rent payments, significant property damage, or illegal activities on the premises can provide sufficient cause for a landlord to terminate the lease and initiate legal action for eviction. Rent control ordinances are a critical element influencing the landlord-tenant relationship, particularly in areas with high housing costs. These ordinances aim to regulate the amount of rent landlords can charge and often place restrictions on rent increases. The rationale behind rent control is to protect tenants from exorbitant rent hikes, particularly low-income individuals and families who may struggle to afford rapidly escalating costs. However, rent control policies can have unintended consequences. They may discourage new construction or investment in existing properties due to reduced profitability, potentially exacerbating the housing shortage in the long run. Rent control ordinances vary considerably by location, and understanding the specific regulations in a given area is crucial for both landlords and tenants. The eviction process is a significant aspect of landlord-tenant law and often the most contentious point of disagreement. While landlords have the right to evict tenants for legitimate reasons, as outlined in their lease or by applicable state law, The eviction process must adhere to strict legal procedures. Unlawful evictions, those not following the proper legal procedures, can result in serious penalties for the landlord, including significant financial sanctions and potential criminal charges. These procedures often involve issuing a formal notice to the tenant, allowing sufficient time to cure the breach of the lease or vacate the premises, and if the tenant fails to comply, filing an eviction lawsuit with the relevant court. Tenants have the right to challenge unlawful evictions and may have legal recourse if the landlord fails to follow proper procedure, retaliates against them for exercising their rights, or attempts to evict them without a legitimate reason. Tenants should carefully review any eviction notices they receive, seeking legal assistance if they believe the eviction is unlawful or retaliatory. Retaliatory evictions. Evictions initiated in response to a tenant's legitimate complaints about property conditions or other lease violations are illegal in many jurisdictions. Therefore, understanding the legal protections available to tenants in the event of an eviction is crucial for protecting their rights and avoiding potentially devastating consequences. Several case studies can illustrate the complexities of landlord-tenant disputes. Consider a scenario where a tenant experiences a persistent leak in their apartment's ceiling, leading to mold growth. The tenant repeatedly requests repair, but the landlord refuses to address the issue. Under the implied warranty of habitability, the tenant has grounds to withhold rent in certain jurisdictions, subject to specific legal procedures, seek legal action to compel repairs, or even terminate the lease. Conversely, consider a case where a tenant consistently fails to pay rent on time. The landlord follows the proper eviction procedures, issuing notices and eventually filing an eviction lawsuit. The court will assess the landlord's compliance with the legal process and the tenant's justifications for non-payment. Another example might involve a landlord attempting to evict a tenant shortly after the tenant reported a safety hazard within the building, a clear instance of potential retaliatory eviction. In this scenario, the tenant needs to document the reporting of the safety hazard, the timing of the eviction notice, and seek legal counsel to challenge the eviction. These cases demonstrate the necessity for both landlords and tenants to be aware of their rights and responsibilities, to understand the legal processes involved in disputes, and to seek legal counsel when navigating complex issues. The landlord-tenant relationship, while inherently contractual, exists within a legal framework designed to protect the rights of both parties. Understanding this framework is crucial for ensuring fair and equitable interactions within the rental housing market. The intricate interplay between lease agreements, local ordinances, and state laws underscores the need for continuous education and vigilant attention to legal detail for both landlords and tenants. A proactive approach to understanding legal protections and responsibilities can significantly reduce conflicts and ensure a more harmonious and legally sound relationship. The protections afforded by landlord-tenant law extend beyond the specifics of lease agreements and eviction procedures. A crucial layer of legal protection involves the prevention of housing discrimination, a complex issue addressed primarily by the Fair Housing Act, FHA, of 1968. This landmark legislation prohibits discriminatory housing practices based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, including children under 18, pregnant women, and those with legal custody of children, and disability. The FHA's reach extends to a wide array of housing-related activities, significantly impacting the lives of millions of Americans. The Act applies not only to the rental market, but also to the sale, financing, and advertising of housing. The FHA's power lies in its broad definition of discriminatory practices. It's not simply about outright refusal to rent or sell a property to someone based on a protected characteristic. The Act also encompasses a range of subtler and more insidious forms of discrimination. For instance, steering, a practice where real estate agents or landlords guide prospective tenants or buyers towards certain neighborhoods based on their race, religion, or other protected characteristic, is explicitly prohibited. Imagine a scenario where an agent consistently directs Black families to properties in predominantly Black neighborhoods, while showing white families properties in exclusively white areas, even if the family's preferences or financial abilities would allow them to live in other, more diverse neighborhoods. This constitutes steering, a clear violation of the FHA. Similarly, the FHA prohibits discriminatory advertising, advertisements that suggest a preference for certain groups while excluding others. For example, an ad for a rental property that explicitly states "no children allowed," or one subtly implying a preference for certain racial groups through imagery or language, are illegal. Even if the intent is not overtly discriminatory, the impact of such advertising on potential tenants or buyers is crucial. The FHA interprets the impact of advertising in line with the intent to create a fair and equal opportunity. This means even ads that seem innocuous on the surface can be deemed discriminatory if they effectively limit access to housing for individuals within protected groups. Discriminatory lending practices also fall under the purview of the FHA. Lenders cannot deny mortgages or other forms of housing financing based on a protected characteristic. This includes redlining, the practice of refusing to provide services or investment in certain neighborhoods based on their racial or ethnic composition. Redlining often disproportionately impacts minority communities, resulting in limited access to affordable housing and contributing to systemic inequalities. The effects of redlining linger even today, despite legal prohibitions, as they have created significant disparities in homeownership rates and wealth accumulation amongst different racial and ethnic groups. The FHA further mandates reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities. This means landlords must make reasonable modifications to their properties to accommodate the needs of disabled tenants, even if it involves some cost to the landlord. For instance, a landlord might be required to install ramps for wheelchair access or modify a bathroom to accommodate a tenant's mobility device. The reasonable accommodation doesn't extend to unreasonable burdens on the landlord, but the balance favors making the housing accessible whenever feasible. A key point here is that reasonable is determined on a case-by-case basis, considering factors like the cost of the modification, the size of the building, and the impact on other tenants. Furthermore, the FHA includes provisions for reasonable modifications, differentiating this provision from reasonable accommodation. Reasonable modifications are physical changes made to a property by a disabled tenant, but they must not alter the fundamental structure of the unit. These modifications must be restored to their original state at the end of the tenancy unless the landlord agrees otherwise. For example, installing grab bars in a bathroom is a reasonable modification, but a complete restructuring of the bathroom layout is likely not. The difference between accommodations and modifications hinges on who performs the alteration and the extent of the changes made. The FHA also prohibits retaliation against individuals who file complaints of housing discrimination. Landlords or other housing providers cannot retaliate by raising rent, evicting a tenant, or otherwise punishing someone for reporting discriminatory practices. This anti-retaliation clause is designed to protect victims from further harm and to encourage reporting of such violations. The legal protection against retaliation reinforces the importance of filing complaints and pursuing available remedies. Many individuals hesitate to report discrimination out of fear of retaliation, but this crucial protection underscores the importance of not allowing fear of reprisal to stifle legitimate complaints. Enforcement of the FHA relies on a combination of administrative and judicial mechanisms. Victims of housing discrimination can file complaints with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, which investigates allegations and can initiate legal action against violators. Alternatively, individuals can pursue legal remedies in federal court, seeking monetary damages, injunctions to stop discriminatory practices, and other forms of relief. The available remedies are substantial, often involving significant financial penalties for those found in violation of the Act, illustrating the seriousness with which housing discrimination is viewed under federal law. Numerous court cases have shaped the interpretation and application of the FHA. Landmark cases have clarified the scope of protected characteristics, the definition of discriminatory practices, and the available remedies for victims. These court decisions provide valuable precedents for future cases, ensuring the Act remains relevant and effective in addressing the evolving dynamics of housing discrimination. Examining past cases provides critical insights for interpreting and applying the Act. This ongoing judicial interpretation clarifies aspects of the FHA, providing guidance for both parties and those involved in the enforcement of the Act. In addition to the FHA, various state and local laws may offer additional protections against housing discrimination. Some jurisdictions have expanded the list of protected characteristics to include things such as sexual orientation, gender identity, marital status, and source of income. These supplementary protections build upon the federal framework, offering more comprehensive protections in certain areas. Consequently, the legal landscape can differ depending on the specific jurisdiction. This creates more complexities for understanding the full spectrum of legal protections against housing discrimination. Understanding the Fair Housing Act and related state and local laws is crucial for both landlords, tenants, and anyone involved in the housing market. Awareness of discriminatory practices, the legal recourse available to victims, and the potential penalties for violators is essential for promoting fair housing and ensuring equal opportunities for all. Education and awareness are key components in preventing and addressing housing discrimination. Active participation in advocating for fair housing rights is necessary to create a more equitable housing system. The continued evolution of these laws and their interpretation is crucial to the ongoing quest for equal housing opportunities for all. The dynamic nature of this legal area underscores the need for vigilance and continuous learning to ensure everyone's rights are protected. The ultimate goal is to create a housing market where everyone has equal access to safe, decent, and affordable housing, regardless of their race, religion, national origin, sex, familial status, or disability. The transition from renting to owning a home represents a significant financial and legal undertaking for most Americans. Homeownership, often viewed as the cornerstone of the American dream, involves navigating a complex landscape of legal and financial processes. Understanding these processes is paramount to protecting one's rights and interests throughout the home buying process and beyond. This section will provide a foundational understanding of homeownership, focusing primarily on the legal aspects of mortgages and the home buying process itself. The cornerstone of most home purchases is the mortgage. A mortgage is essentially a loan secured by the property itself. The borrower, or homeowner, pledges the property as collateral to the lender, typically a bank or mortgage company. If the borrower fails to repay the loan according to the terms of the mortgage agreement, the lender has the legal right to foreclose on the property, meaning they can seize and sell the property to recoup their losses. This underscores the critical importance of thoroughly understanding the terms and conditions of a mortgage agreement before signing. Mortgage agreements are legally binding contracts, often lengthy and complex documents filled with legal jargon. It's crucial for prospective homeowners to carefully review every clause, seeking clarification from legal professionals if any aspects remain unclear. These agreements typically detail the loan amount, interest rate, repayment schedule, including the duration of the loan and monthly payments, late payment penalties, prepayment penalties, if any, and provisions for default. Understanding these terms is crucial to avoid financial hardship and potential legal disputes down the line. A common mistake many homebuyers make is overlooking the fine print, assuming everything is standard. This can lead to unforeseen consequences and potential legal battles. Beyond the specifics of the loan terms, mortgage agreements often contain clauses relating to property insurance, property taxes, and escrow accounts. Many lenders require homeowners to maintain homeowners insurance to protect the property from damage and to ensure the lender's investment is secured. Property taxes are another significant expense associated with homeownership, and the mortgage agreement typically outlines how these taxes are handled, often through an escrow account managed by the lender. Escrow accounts are crucial in ensuring timely payment of property taxes and insurance premiums, protecting both the homeowner and the lender from financial risk. Failing to maintain adequate insurance or failing to make timely tax payments can trigger a default and, consequently, foreclosure. The home buying process itself involves several key stages, each with its own set of legal considerations. The process typically begins with finding a suitable property and making an offer to purchase. This offer, typically presented in the form of a legally binding purchase agreement or contract, details the purchase price, the closing date, contingencies such as the buyer obtaining financing or a satisfactory home inspection, and other relevant terms. Once the offer is accepted, the buyer typically undertakes a home inspection, which is crucial to identifying potential problems with the property. This inspection can be a critical factor in negotiating repairs or even backing out of the deal if significant issues are discovered. Obtaining financing is another essential step in the process. This typically involves applying for a mortgage with a lender and providing the necessary documentation, including credit reports, income verification, and proof of employment. The lender will assess the borrower's creditworthiness and determine whether they qualify for a mortgage and what terms they will be offered. The approval process can often be extensive and contingent upon various factors. A pre-approval can help streamline this process, showcasing a buyer's financial readiness to a seller. The closing process is the final stage of the home buying process, where the buyer and seller formally exchange ownership of the property. This involves signing numerous documents, including the mortgage agreement, the deed transferring ownership of the property, and other relevant legal documents. It is advisable to have a real estate attorney review these documents before signing to ensure there are no unexpected clauses or errors. Closing costs, encompassing various fees and expenses related to the transaction, are typically incurred at this stage. These costs can be significant and should be factored into the overall budget. The legal protections available to homeowners are varied and depend on the specific circumstances. State laws significantly impact the rights and responsibilities of homeowners, particularly regarding foreclosure procedures. Foreclosure is a legal process initiated by a lender to reclaim a property when a borrower defaults on their mortgage payments. The specific procedures vary by state, but they generally involve a series of legal actions before the lender can take possession of the property. Homeowners facing foreclosure may have legal recourse through negotiation, loan modification programs, or legal challenges to the foreclosure process. However, it's crucial to seek legal counsel early in the process to understand available options and protect one's rights. Beyond foreclosure protection, homeowners also have legal rights regarding property maintenance, zoning laws, and property rights in general. Understanding zoning laws is crucial to avoid legal issues related to property improvements or use. Property rights encompass a homeowner's right to quiet enjoyment of their property, which means they have the right to possess and use their property without unreasonable interference from others. Disputes regarding property boundaries, easements, rights of way across another's property, or other property rights often necessitate legal intervention. The complexity of homeownership extends beyond the initial purchase. Homeowners must contend with ongoing maintenance and repair responsibilities, property taxes, and potential legal issues related to their property. Regular maintenance is essential to prevent costly repairs and protect the value of the investment. Property taxes are an ongoing expense that homeowners must budget for and pay on time. Neglecting these responsibilities can lead to legal issues, such as liens on the property or even foreclosure. In conclusion, the legal aspects of homeownership are multifaceted and intricate. From the complexities of mortgage agreements to the procedures associated with home purchases, foreclosures, and ongoing property maintenance, a comprehensive understanding of relevant laws and legal procedures is essential for protecting homeowners' rights and interests. Seeking legal counsel when needed is strongly recommended, especially in complex situations or when facing legal challenges related to property ownership. Proactive planning and a thorough understanding of the legal ramifications of homeownership are critical to ensure a positive and secure homeownership experience. By understanding these legal aspects, homeowners can navigate the process more effectively, safeguard their financial investments, and ensure they enjoy the many benefits of homeownership while minimizing potential risks. The transition from the complexities of homeownership to the equally intricate world of tenant rights and responsibilities necessitates a thorough understanding of eviction processes and legal protections. While homeownership involves significant financial commitments and long-term responsibilities, renting presents its own set of legal considerations, particularly when facing eviction. This section delves into the legal framework governing evictions in the United States, highlighting the rights of tenants and the processes landlords must follow to legally remove a tenant from a rental property. The eviction process varies considerably from state to state, underscoring the importance of familiarizing oneself with the specific laws applicable to one's location. However, several common elements generally characterize the process. Landlords typically initiate eviction proceedings by serving the tenant with a formal notice, often called a notice to vacate or a notice to pay or quit. The specific requirements for these notices, such as the required time frame for the tenant to comply, are dictated by state and local laws. These laws are designed to provide tenants with sufficient opportunity to remedy the situation that led to the eviction notice before legal action is commenced. A notice to vacate is typically used when the lease agreement has expired and the landlord does not intend to renew it. This notice provides the tenant with advance warning of the lease termination and a reasonable time to find alternative housing. The required notice period varies by jurisdiction, ranging from 30 to 60 days, or even longer depending on the terms of the lease agreement or applicable state laws. A notice to pay or quit is issued when the tenant has failed to pay rent or otherwise violated the terms of their lease agreement. This notice generally gives the tenant a specific period, often a few days, to pay the overdue rent or cure the breach of the lease. Failure to comply with the notice to pay or quit typically results in the landlord initiating formal eviction proceedings. The initiation of formal eviction proceedings marks a significant escalation in the process. This typically involves the landlord filing a lawsuit in a civil court, often called an unlawful detainer action, or a similar designation depending on the jurisdiction. The lawsuit formally alleges that the tenant is unlawfully occupying the property and seeks a court order authorizing the landlord to regain possession. Serving the tenant with a copy of the lawsuit is crucial, providing the tenant with legal notice of the pending action and an opportunity to respond. Failure to respond to the lawsuit can result in a default judgment against the tenant, leading to a court order authorizing their eviction. Tenants have the right to defend themselves against eviction actions, and it is vital that they understand and exercise those rights. A key aspect of this defense is the right to due process, meaning they are entitled to a fair hearing before a judge or magistrate. At this hearing, the tenant can present evidence to challenge the landlord's claim, potentially arguing that the eviction is unlawful. For example, a tenant might argue that the eviction notice was improperly served, that the landlord failed to comply with specific legal requirements, or that the eviction is retaliatory, meaning the landlord is retaliating for the tenant's assertion of their rights, such as reporting housing code violations. Additionally, tenants may argue that the landlord failed to provide reasonable accommodations for a disability or violated the Fair Housing Act. The Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, or disability. If a tenant believes their eviction is discriminatory, they can assert this as a defense in court and potentially bring a separate lawsuit against the landlord for violating the Fair Housing Act. These violations can result in significant penalties for the landlord, including fines and damages to the tenant. Furthermore, the tenant may be able to obtain injunctive relief, preventing the eviction from proceeding. The legal protections afforded to tenants are extensive and vary by jurisdiction. In many jurisdictions, just cause eviction laws exist, limiting a landlord's ability to evict a tenant without legitimate cause. Just cause typically includes non-payment of rent, violation of lease terms, or damage to the property. However, many states have placed restrictions on the types of actions that can lead to eviction, preventing landlords from retaliatory evictions or evicting tenants without legal justification. It's essential for tenants to familiarize themselves with their state's specific just cause eviction laws. Beyond legal protections regarding the eviction process itself, tenants also benefit from other crucial legal safeguards. For instance, many states have enacted laws to protect tenants from abusive or illegal practices by landlords. These laws often address issues such as landlord access to the premises, the landlord's duty to maintain the property in habitable condition, and the procedures for handling security deposits. Understanding these laws and the rights they confer is critical for tenants to protect themselves from potentially exploitative or unfair treatment. The landlord's responsibility to maintain a habitable property is paramount. This duty is often codified in housing codes and implies that the landlord must ensure the property meets minimal standards of safety and habitability. The specific requirements vary by jurisdiction, but they typically include provisions for functioning plumbing, heating, and electrical systems, as well as adequate pest control and structurally sound premises. If a landlord fails to meet these minimum standards, the tenant may have legal recourse, potentially including withholding rent, requesting repairs, or even seeking legal action to compel the landlord to fulfill their obligations. The withholding of rent, however, should be done carefully and according to legal procedures to avoid triggering eviction proceedings. It's always wise to document any maintenance issues and to communicate them clearly to the landlord in writing. The handling of security deposits also constitutes a crucial area where tenants' legal rights are protected. Security deposits are generally intended to cover damages to the property beyond normal wear and tear. State laws typically dictate how these deposits must be handled, including requirements for documentation, return of the deposit within a specified time frame, and the provision of an itemized accounting of any deductions from the deposit for repairs. Landlords must comply with these state laws, and tenants have legal recourse if they believe the landlord has improperly handled their security deposit. This may involve filing a lawsuit to recover the wrongfully withheld portion of the deposit. Navigating the complexities of tenant rights and responsibilities often necessitates legal expertise. Tenants facing eviction should seek legal counsel promptly to understand their rights and options. Legal aid organizations and pro bono attorneys frequently provide assistance to tenants facing eviction, particularly those with limited financial resources. Understanding the legal procedures involved, the applicable state and local laws, and the rights and responsibilities of both tenants and landlords are crucial for protecting one's interests and ensuring a fair resolution to any housing dispute. The consequences of failing to understand these legal intricacies can be severe, resulting in the loss of housing and significant financial hardship. Proactive measures such as maintaining good communication with landlords, carefully reviewing lease agreements, and seeking legal counsel when necessary can significantly mitigate these risks. Ultimately, a well-informed tenant is a well-protected tenant. Having established the fundamental rights and responsibilities within the landlord-tenant relationship, including the intricacies of eviction procedures and tenant protections, we now turn to the critical issue of housing discrimination. The Fair Housing Act of 1968, a landmark piece of legislation, prohibits discrimination in housing based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, and disability. This act forms the bedrock of legal recourse for individuals facing discriminatory housing practices. Understanding the remedies available and the proper reporting mechanisms is crucial for victims of such discrimination. The Fair Housing Act prohibits not only overt acts of discrimination, but also subtle and indirect forms of discrimination, often referred to as disparate impact. Disparate impact occurs when a seemingly neutral policy or practice disproportionately affects a protected group. For example, a seemingly neutral requirement for a certain level of income might disproportionately exclude minority applicants, thus violating the Fair Housing Act, even if the stated reason for rejection isn't explicitly discriminatory. This highlights the complexity of proving housing discrimination and underscores the need for diligent documentation. One of the most effective remedies for victims of housing discrimination is a civil lawsuit. This legal action allows individuals to seek monetary damages for the harm suffered as a result of the discriminatory practices. These damages can include compensation for emotional distress, financial losses incurred as a result of the discrimination, such as the cost of searching for alternative housing, and punitive damages intended to punish the discriminator and deter future acts of discrimination. In addition to monetary compensation, a civil lawsuit can also result in injunctive relief, compelling the discriminator to take affirmative actions to remedy the discriminatory conduct. This could involve ordering the landlord to rent the property to the discriminated applicant or cease discriminatory practices altogether. Filing a civil lawsuit, however, requires careful preparation and potentially significant legal resources. Gathering substantial evidence of discriminatory practices is essential. This typically involves meticulously documenting all interactions with the housing provider, including emails, letters, phone records, and notes from conversations. It's essential to preserve any advertisements or listings that potentially reveal discriminatory preferences or practices. Witnesses who can attest to the discriminatory treatment can also provide crucial evidence. Engaging legal counsel experienced in fair housing litigation is strongly advised. Attorneys specializing in fair housing law can help navigate the complexities of litigation, ensure proper adherence to legal procedures, and effectively present the case before the court. They understand the nuances of proving discriminatory intent or disparate impact and can help build a robust case to maximize chances of success. Beyond civil litigation, individuals can also file administrative complaints with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. HUD is responsible for enforcing the Fair Housing Act, and filing a complaint with HUD initiates an investigation into the alleged discriminatory practices. The investigation process involves gathering information, conducting interviews with the involved parties, and analyzing the evidence presented. HUD has the authority to conciliate disputes between the parties, attempting to reach a mutually acceptable resolution without resorting to formal litigation. If conciliation efforts are unsuccessful, HUD can initiate administrative proceedings, potentially leading to monetary penalties for the discriminator. The administrative complaint process offers a less expensive and potentially less time-consuming alternative to civil litigation. However, the outcome is not always as comprehensive. HUD's resources are finite and cases can take considerable time to process. Success with a HUD complaint is not guaranteed. It also lacks the ability to fully compensate for all damages associated with the discrimination in the same way a civil suit might. Filing an administrative complaint with HUD is often a strategic first step, preserving rights while exploring potential settlement opportunities before engaging in the more extensive and potentially costly process of civil litigation. Victims of discrimination often find themselves using both avenues, filing a complaint with HUD concurrently while preparing a civil lawsuit. The effectiveness of both civil lawsuits and administrative complaints hinges on strong evidentiary support. Maintaining meticulous records throughout the housing search and application process is of paramount importance. This includes documenting all communication with landlords or property managers, keeping copies of rental applications, and noting any perceived discriminatory comments or actions. It's advisable to keep records of any advertisements or listings that appear to be discriminatory in nature. If denied housing, detailed records of the reasons given, along with any other information that suggests discriminatory practices, are essential. Furthermore, if possible, it is crucial to gather evidence that supports the claim of discrimination. This could include testimony from witnesses who observed discriminatory actions, emails, or other written correspondence that reveals discriminatory intent or data demonstrating a pattern of discriminatory practices by the housing provider. Even seemingly insignificant details can be valuable when presented as a whole. The process of reporting housing discrimination can be emotionally taxing, but understanding the available legal remedies and diligently documenting discriminatory practices is crucial for a successful outcome. Victims should not hesitate to seek legal advice from organizations specializing in fair housing law. Many legal aid societies and pro bono attorneys offer assistance to individuals who lack the financial means to pursue litigation independently. They provide guidance on the necessary steps for reporting discrimination, help gather and organize evidence, and represent victims of discrimination in legal proceedings. Beyond the specific legal remedies, it is also important to consider the broader societal impact of housing discrimination. This discriminatory practice perpetuates inequality and limits opportunities for individuals belonging to protected classes. By actively combating housing discrimination through diligent reporting and legal action, we contribute to a more just and equitable society. The fight against housing discrimination is an ongoing battle, and every successful case contributes to a stronger legal framework protecting the rights of all individuals seeking housing. The legal remedies available, while complex, provide a pathway to redress, ensuring that those who engage in discriminatory practices are held accountable for their actions and that victims receive the justice they deserve. The documentation process is essential, demanding a methodical approach that captures even the smallest detail, as these seemingly insignificant occurrences can collectively build a strong case for redress.
Like and subscribe to support the channel. Donations welcome.